Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talking Away the Taboo. I'm Dr. Amy Barron, and I am thrilled tonight to bring you Risa Levine. Risa is really an accomplished lawyer, fierce advocate for anyone struggling with fertility. She's done an masterful really, I would say job, but it's not a job for her, it's a passion. She's done, here she is. She has done she has really, whether it's on her own, which we're going to talk about, and obviously with the support and the assistance of other people in the fertility space, she's done a tremendous amount to help all of us and all of you to really get what you need and get the support you need from a legislative perspective. So, Risa, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please say hello and introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Risa Levine. I live in Manhattan. I am an attorney by profession. The advocacy that I do is volunteer and on the side and ancillary to my professional world. And I've been doing it since 2004.
Okay, so let's just launch right into this. As someone who has her own personal story, as I do, I have been following the world of infertility in terms of advocacy for a very long time, trying to make sure that whatever treatments that we had and other pieces were going to be covered, was it not going to be covered, et cetera, et cetera. And then going through that story for myself, and frankly, then getting involved in this work afterwards, your name kept popping up over and over and over again. So can you let's go back to the beginning. Tell us who Risa is. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your family and sort of how, let's start from the beginning of where the seeds for this, you wanted to be a lawyer, you are a lawyer. So where the seeds for this were planted.
So it's an interesting question because there's certain things that I knew even when I was a child that came into fruition, but certain things I didn't understand about myself and also about the world that also play into how my life has unfolded. So I grew up in New Jersey, in a small town in New Jersey, and it wasn't a particularly, I mean, there was a small Jewish community. And my grandfather was the Hebrew school teacher for, after school, public school kids who got educated afterwards. And his education, the education that students got from my grandfather far exceeded the education that people may have gotten at Jewish day schools and yeshivas, and they will say that. But it was another era. But my parents chose to send me to Jewish day school. I went to Yeshiva of Hudson County, and I started at Rogerson, and I was really unhappy there. I transferred to Yeshiva Flatbush in my junior year and went to Camp Masad. There was never a time in my life that I didn't think a few things. One, that I was going to be a lawyer, and two, that I was going to get married and have kids. I knew that both of those things from a very young age, even in a time when you went around the classroom and the teacher said, what are you going to be when you grow up? And for women, it was going to be either a nurse or a teacher. I always said a nurse or a teacher, but I knew I was going to be a lawyer.
I love it.
I always knew that. What I also hoped, and it's a funny thing to say so many decades later, but I hoped that I would also get to have the experience of living single in Manhattan for a couple of years. Like I had read, those books that there was a series about a stewardess, Vicky Carr, and she lived in the city, and Sherry Ames, the nurse, all those books that we read as kids. And so I wanted, I hoped that I would have that experience of getting to live in Manhattan before I got married and had kids. Never understanding or anticipating that would actually be my whole life. So I went to Flatbush, and from there I went, and it's Flatbush. You're involved in a million things. I went to DC on a educational 3-day thing to learn about the different branches of government. We marched in the Israel Day Parade. We participated in all the Soviet jury marches and all the Soviet jury activities. So I was very much engrossed in all of the activism that an engaged Jewish kid would be involved with, whatever it was. I then went to Brandeis and I continued being engaged. In addition, I got involved a little bit with Amnesty International. I got involved with Ethiopian Jewish organizations, and also major part of my college experience was getting involved in the Soviet jury movement and participating in advocacy on behalf of Soviet Jews in DC, going on the student lobbies. And by the time I was a senior, I chaired it. I was the national coordinator for the Student Coalition for Soviet Jewry. And we broke records. A couple of years ago, I saw something about they broke a record and they had over 700 people on the lobby. I'm like, no, you didn't break a record. I had over 700 people in 1983. And so that was very important to me. Continued on to college, graduated college, went to law school, and continued being involved in a variety of causes, both Jewish and non-Jewish, some cultural. I was involved with the ballet. I was involved with some museum stuff, but also UJA and Israel Bonds, got very involved with Israel Bonds, and did go on a few APAC. As a senior, I was in college. I spoke on advocacy for a B'nai B'rith conference and was a B'nai B'rith delegate to an international conference that took place in Jerusalem on Soviet Jewry. So, I mean, it was always in my blood.
Oh, clearly. I mean, it's interesting because as a medical person, the advocacy world is not the world I know at all. And for me, I could give you the entire story and I would just substitute this lab I worked in and this hospital and this. So it's interesting to track that this was a piece of your life from the very beginning, the advocacy piece. And little did you know that it was going to become personal. So
that's correct. That's 100% correct. One of the key things that I missed was that I didn't need to practice law in a law firm, that I could actually be a lobbyist. Even though I knew lobbyists, I don't know why I never made the connection that it could be something that I did as a profession. Because, despite what you hear, not all lobbyists are good. I mean, the AMA, of course, has lobbyists. Every charitable organization has government relations department and lobbyists. Teachers have lobbyists. I mean, lobbyists do good things. There's lobbying for good, and I just do it as a volunteer. I probably would have been far more fulfilled in my life if that was my professional career. But, at my age, it's hard to, switch careers.
Right.
So as an adult, I continued to work on advocacy issues, and I also was involved in Democratic Party causes. And through that, and sometimes they
of course
intertwined,
yes.
crossed, and because I knew how to lobby and I knew people in the Democratic Party. So, for example, in 2000, when Hillary was running for Senate and Joe Lieberman was named as the vice presidential nominee, the Clinton campaign sent me to speak as an ambassador for Hillary's campaign to YU and Stern students at a Shabbaton. And during the weekend, I got friendly with some of the students, and they're like, okay, this is great. We want to be involved with the campaign, because they really want to see a Jewish vice president. But after the campaign, what could we get involved with? And if you recall, that was shortly after the Intifada, when Ariel Sharon went to the Temple Mount. Yes. And it was a really rough time for the state of Israel. And there were a couple of Israeli soldiers and a businessman who had been kidnapped. And we decided we would do a student lobby to Washington. And we organized a student lobby out of my law office and with the Stern and YU students. And we coordinate students from 20 different colleges along the Eastern Seaboard. We raised money. I raised a lot of money through friends and family. And we did get some money from Hadassah and from APAC. They supported our efforts. And we brought over 700 kids down to DC for a student lobby, for emergency aid to Israel and for demanding the release, that the American government get involved in demanding the release of the hostages.
Amazing. So I guess talk to me now. I mean, you've now set the stage. We
Right.
now all understand who you are, where you come from, where your affinities lie, where your passions lie, what you wanted to get involved in. And in the meantime, I'm guessing you're living single in Manhattan. And so tell us about your personal life, and then how all of the advocacy turned personal.
So in the meantime, your point is incredibly well taken. I I worked for big law firms, and sneaking out to go out on a date was always difficult. But I did, and I got fixed up on a lot of really awful blind dates. I mean, I have 3, marriages to my credit, but I cannot think of one blind date that I ever had that was a positive experience.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I've had my share myself, but still.
So, I watched I'm the oldest of all the cousins. I watched all my cousins get married. My brother and my sister both got married at 22. I watched, them get married. I watched my cousins get married. The years are going by. And I had a boyfriend in my 30s, and it was a very not great ending. And then after 9/11, he showed up on my doorstep. He knocked, like literally rang the doorbell a couple of months after 9/11. And we got engaged in a very short period of time and got married. I was already 40. So when I started trying to have a baby, it didn't go very well. And I quickly moved on to a reproductive endocrinologist. It was actually on my 42nd birthday that I had that appointment, and immediately started trying. I tested positive at my first IUI on the day that I was heading down to the Democratic National Convention in 2004. I took the test and then got into my car, and I'm waiting for the call, waiting for the call, waiting for the call. The call came. I pulled over to the side of the road, and they like, congratulations, you're pregnant. I was driving a convertible. I threw the top back. I was screaming the whole way up to Boston. I was hoarse by the time I got up to Boston. First person I saw was Hillary. Told her I was pregnant. I mean, like literally day one, I was so excited. But they said, your numbers are a little low, so you may want to go for a test while you're up in Boston. And sure enough, 2 days later, my numbers were not going in the right direction. And I came home early from then. And, I basically had my first very early miscarriage, obviously, at the convention, and came home. And that, and it just continued from there. In the meantime, I had a lifetime max of $10,000 in coverage. And I knew that was wrong. I mean, that was not right. And so I still had these leftover folders, these blue folders from this student lobby that I had done. And I still probably had like 100 or something like that folders left in a box, taking up space in my office. And I decided that I would try and get a national mandate. Like, I know how to do this. So I tried to get a national mandate to get infertility treatments covered. And so I was on those support boards. There used to be one called IVF Connections. They were anonymous support boards. And I got some of the people that I knew to tell me their story. And I, printed them out, and I put them into folders, and I downloaded the information from the CDC website, and costs from some of the clinics. I put these folders together, and I would go everywhere with these folders. By that time I was involved in the election. I was involved in, supporting other candidates for different offices, and I would just go everywhere I could with my folders, and I would say that we needed to have a national mandate. And I continued to cycle. I continued to advocate on my own.
Wow. Wow.
And I continued to have failure, abysmal failure, or early miscarriages. There was one cycle I remember literally standing in a department store in New York City with a pair of Manolo Blahniks in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for the phone call to tell me that I was miscarrying. I had gotten further, it was a couple of weeks in, but it wasn't feeling right. And I'm standing there, I'm like, if the news is bad, I'm buying these shoes. Like that's all there is to it. I'm buying these shoes. I mean, it was crazy. Like you just didn't know what to do with yourself anymore.
Totally. I mean, so that's really my question. I mean, we're going to get to the next piece, but my question is beyond retail therapy. I mean, because we all know retail therapy can only go so far, and yet you're still walking around. I mean, peddling is the wrong word, but the word of, advocating clearly with these blue folders everywhere you go, and you're literally in it yourself. I mean, how did you not just crawl into your bed, into a ball, and like never get out? Like, how did you get yourself up each time and still be able to go out with these folders and go talk to people?
It was the only thing I could do, because at the time I didn't tell anybody. Everybody in the whole Democratic Party knew that I was struggling. I didn't tell my single friends because I had escaped, and I didn't, I didn't think that they would understand or be supportive, or, I think that, I kind of knew some would even be resentful. Well, you're married, I'm not even married, that kind of thing.
Right.
And my married friends with babies, they just, one person's husband said, well, you should come visit us in Portland. All you have to do is drink the water here and you'll get pregnant.
Oh God.
That,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of awful, not helpful, those kind of ones. So it was very lonely. And I'm not going to say my husband was particularly supportive. He had his own issues and he crawled into his own cave. So advocacy was the way that I got out of bed. I called my life a cycle of cycling. There was the mini cycles when you wake up early, you go for your testing, you sit in your office all day pretending that you're working, waiting for the phone call. You go home, you wait around for when you're going to give yourself your injections, and then you do it all again the next day. And then in between cycles, you're just waiting to cycle again. I mean, it was just a cycle of cycling.
Totally.
And I mean, it was rough. And then Hillary ran for her second race for her reelection in 2006. And I was already very invested and she knew what I was doing. And I remember there was an event in Tribeca and I talked to her about it again. And she said, I'm going to help you after the election, come down and see me in DC, which is what I did. So in January of 2007, Hillary had just won her second race. Nancy Pelosi was sworn in as speaker, and my friend Kirsten Gillibrand had just become a congresswoman for the first time. I was down in DC for all of this, and with my folders, going from place to place to place, and doing it at night at the parties, but also I had made appointments on the Hill. So one of the congressmen that I went to go see actually called, unbeknownst to me, after my appointment, called Resolve, the National Infertility Association, wow, and told them, like, hey, there's this woman running around Capitol Hill on your issues. You really should get in touch with her. So one day I get this phone call out of the blue from Barb Kalura, who at the time was executive director, since has become president and CEO of Resolve, the National Infertility Association. And she asked me to chair their advocacy day. And of course I said yes. By that time, that must have been, I guess that was sometime in 2007. My last cycle was in the summer of 2007. And then this is, getting to the ugliest parts. My then husband we went through some really bad times while I was cycling. And then I had 4 frozens from that cycle. And I was in the process of doing a frozen embryo transfer that November. And he came home and said, you have to cancel this cycle. My office is going through contractions. If you don't cancel the cycle and give up your office and move your office into the apartment, and there was one other condition, then I'm divorcing you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so he called Cornell and canceled my cycle.
Oh my goodness.
And a month later, he went away to deal with some of his personal stuff, and I went to Iowa on the presidential. And he came home from his stuff and said, like a week or 2 later, he came home and said, I'm leaving you. That's it. I'm out. So that spring of 2008, I was working on the presidential. I was doing 3 things. I was chairing my first advocacy day, and I was chairing my college's 25th reunion.
Oh my goodness.
And that was how I got through those first months of being separated. And
just staying busy, because that was what you knew, and that was the thing that was going to carry you through.
So he moved out in the beginning, but I was still married. So I was still going to the mikvah. So then advocacy day took place, and the last primary took place, and my college reunion took place all at the same time that the mikvah lady said, all right, I asked the rabbi, you've been doing this for 5 months. You're done. You're out. You don't need to do this anymore. And shortly thereafter, I actually got my get. But by that point, I was the voice of advocacy and infertility, and by my own efforts. And I chaired Advocacy Day for Resolve 4 more times. And I also chaired a congressional briefing on the Hill and continued to do that work. And I've been, and then I thought it was time for other people to chair, advocacy. Like that had to.
You so graciously said,
Nothing
it's
grows.
time.
Nothing grows if you don't bring in new people, and it's continued to grow as beautifully. Very proud of what Resolve is doing. I continue to remain involved, but then we started to work on New York State advocacy, and since then we have succeeded in passing 2 bills in New York. The first one in 2019, and it doesn't happen in a day. It was years of working on these.
Yep.
2019, we passed the Fair Access to Fertility Treatment Act, which was with the enormous support of Melissa DeRosa and Governor Cuomo, which provided for coverage for 3 cycles of infertility treatment of IVF in New York. And then the following year, we legalized gestational surrogacy in New York. So that kind of brings us pretty close to the present.
Yeah, I mean, you just condensed, so many years of your life in basically all one. But and what you've managed to accomplish is, it's almost unheard of and extraordinary, because across America, how many other states have coverage for 3 cycles? How many other states have, gestational surrogacy as, legal? How many others?
So I am really bad with numbers. I mean, if you tell me a number, I don't remember it 30 seconds later. But
the numbers are small. They're very, very small.
States have some form of fertility mandate. That doesn't, they all vary. And I believe the number is 13 states provide for the coverage of IVF. New York does not require that you do IUIs prior to IVF if your physician says that it's not medically um, uh, 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 uh,
Necessary.
advocated, right? Like it's not,
Right.
yeah, indicated, sorry.
Yep.
You know, if you have blocked fallopian tubes, there's really no reason to do an IUI,
Correct.
for
Correct.
example. New York also does not have a religious exemption to the requirement to cover, and it also doesn't have an age limitation or restriction, um, which makes it at the forefront of, and it is not a dollar cap, it's a cycle cap, because
Right.
costs are different in New York. What it might cost in upstate New York might cover 3 cycles, but in Manhattan it would only cover 2 cycles, and that's not fair either. So
Right.
it's a 3-cycle mandate, which is really state of the art. Connecticut lifted their, I believe Connecticut lifted their age restriction a couple of years ago, and the New York statute has one problem with it. It only covers patients who are insured under large group plans, large employer plans, so 100 and more employees that are not self-insured. Other states have better plans, but we are stuck with a federal provision that would have made it impossible to cover for small and individual group plans. So that's a problem with the New York mandate that we hope to change, but we have to change federal law first. So it's a very complicated process. But the New York law also provides for fertility preservation for cancer and other patients, for anybody who needs to freeze their eggs prior to chemo, for, you know, or radiation. So that is full coverage for everybody. So that is an excellent part of the New York law.
Incredible. I'm just in awe. I mean, I've known about this work, and this is, you know, living in New York State myself. It's something that I've known about and have, you know, many followers and many of the people that I've worked with over the years. You know, the fact that this came online not so long ago has been just an absolute, really just a change maker for so many people. It just gives them access in a situation when they would not have previously. So I just, on behalf of everyone, I can't ask you all of these things and ask you to share all of these pieces without just saying, first of all, thank you.
Well,
Um,
you know, and again, I have definitely pushed for a lot of this, but it doesn't, and there's pieces of it that I, you know, definitely know that my name belongs on it, but nothing happens without a team and without advocates and without, you know, without, I'm sure there are people on this call who came to Albany with us. We worked closely with Aguda on the Fair Access to Fertility Treatment Act. They helped us a lot. A-Time helped.
yep,
So it's, you don't, nobody, no matter who they are and no matter what the press is, nobody does it alone. And
absolutely.
anybody who claims to is just not telling you the whole thing.
Right,
Um,
right.
so we had strong advocates in the assembly. We had great sponsors. Unfortunately, our sponsor on the IVF bill didn't win re-election, which is a real loss. So if anybody is from Astoria, if anybody's from Queens and comes across Arabella Simotis, she was truly an angel. So if you ever come across a woman named Arabella Simotis, who really, we couldn't have passed that bill without her, and our other sponsors, Diane Savino on the Fair, from Staten Island on the Fair Access to Fertility Treatment Act, and of course Amy Paulin, who is from Westchester, in the Assembly, and Brad Hoylman, who is a miracle worker in the New York State Senate, who lives on the Upper West Side. Just an absolute, truly fights for all the things that you know, we care about as a community. So it doesn't happen without them. It doesn't happen without a woman in the governor's office who fought really hard for us, and who, you know, and who brought the governor along, and
Yes,
who then became a huge advocate.
yes,
And our current governor also, Kathy Hochul, was an incredible supporter. So you don't get this, you know, organizations, you know, I mean, everybody has to get involved. All the people on this call know who your state and federal legislators are, because they, you know, they don't know about our problems unless we tell them. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and not everybody is interested in or wants to do the same thing, but everybody can do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So just, as we sort of close here, can you take us back, and I'm going to ask you now to dig a little deeper personally. I mean, you went through all of this. You were, carrying your blue folders and working with all of the people you mentioned and all of the people who, all of the little people as well. And in the meantime, as you're doing all of this, your own personal story is just falling apart, that your marriage is failing and has failed, and you were not able to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy. You had, how many miscarriages did you have, Risa?
Four.
Four. Oh God. So my question is, how like, I know you said that you use this to really, spur yourself out of the depression and out of the pieces that were hard, because you wanted to really give to others what you had some access to, and you wanted to enable other people to be able to do this. But you don't have any children. And so how do you just talk to us about the emotions, talk to us about those times and up until the present day. Give us a little bit of your mindset of how you push through and how you've taken that and you've been able to create something beautiful and different out of it.
I do not want to give anybody the impression that I'm emotionally healthy. I cry a lot, and I have more than once, several times, hyperventilated, like truly, like lost it, and couldn't breathe. I mean, hyperventilated when somebody either brought a baby to me or talked to it, or if it hit me at the wrong time in the wrong place. I've had very, very bad physical reactions, and it's pretty scary when you can't breathe. It happened once when I was having a meeting with somebody about infertility, and she didn't tell me that she brought, that she was going to be bringing a baby, and we met outside for coffee, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I lost it, and I got very scared because I was out on the street, and it wasn't good. It happened at my nephew's wedding when another one of my nephews, whose wife was due any second, started to talk to me about it. And I'm at the wedding. I like ran away, and I had to, I couldn't breathe. I'm in a corner. I'm holding like thing over my, it happens. So it happened on a flight to Israel once. And fortunately, I had a really good, I mean, this is a number of years ago. I was still cycling, and the flight attendant caught on that I was not faking it and moved me and moved.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Because it's LL, they're not usually good about stuff.
I was gonna say they're usually not known for their empathy.
She completely did not want to have to figure out how to land a plane in the middle of the Atlantic. It was not, it wasn't good, and they, so that it's not something to be proud of, but I have friends who can't go over bridges. My dad can't go, drive across a bridge. They have severe acrophobia, and I never understood it. I was like, what's the big deal? Just look forward. What's the big deal?
Right.
And now I understand, because sometimes it doesn't happen all the time. It's not a daily occurrence, but every once in a while, something just hits me wrong, and I don't do well. And it's, for anybody who has ever had that kind of attack, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I avoid babies. I truly try to help people get pregnant. I help people, on my own. I get the phone call, like, help me get through my cycle, talk me through it. I've gone with people to retrieval when they, if they're coming in from out of town and they don't have a husband who can go with them or something like that. I've gone with people. I've given injections. But once you get pregnant, get me out of it.
Right. Do you, I mean, the question is, how do you, so what does your life look like now? how do you feel, there are, as you say, I mean, and as someone who has had multiple losses myself, there are absolutely times where I'm somewhere and all of a sudden that feeling that you're describing also just like comes over me. And I do have children. But my question is, how do you want people to approach you, and how do you want people to act around you? Because it's an interesting space for people to be in. And I've heard both ways, where some people say, like, treat me exactly the same as everyone else. Like, it doesn't matter that I don't have kids or don't have the number of kids that I thought I was going to have. I want you to tell me everything. I want you to involve me in everything. I want you. I want you. And then there are others who just say, like, like, this is not my thing. And as you just said, and you mentioned a little bit yourself about how, like, I can do the pregnancy, I can do the shots, and I can do the cycling, and I can do those pieces, but once you get pregnant, I'm not interested. So do the people around you know that? And how do you tell them
So
that?
over the years, I've tried really hard to be very candid and put it up front. And some people get it and some don't. There's a woman who, when she was pregnant, she married a friend of mine. We became friends. She then got pregnant. And while she was pregnant, I said, listen, when the baby comes, I'm out. Like, please, please do not take it personally, but I cannot be there for you. Um, they had a lot of friends, and frankly, I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do anyhow. I mean, you have a baby, celebrate. What do you need me for? Like, and sure enough, I get an email from her, and I open the email, and the baby's picture bursts onto my screen, and I didn't have a good reaction, and I just didn't respond. I chipped in with somebody else. Actually, that person was the first person I hyperventilated from. Um, I didn't go to the bris. A year or two later, I was out at the Hamptons at a party, and they showed up with the baby, and I went into the house. It was, outside by the pool, and I went into the house, and that was the first time I hyperventilated. I was lucky I found a paper bag, and I stayed in the house the rest of the time. And she then sent me a very nasty email about how it's not all about you.
Oh gosh.
So I don't, so yes, I've lost friends over it. I mean, no, you're right. It's not all about me. It's not about me at all. So what do you need to be involved? Like, it's about
Right.
you and your family. Like, you're good. You guys are
Right.
good. So
Right.
I don't really understand that part. It's really hard because my nephews have started to have babies, and I feel badly that I'm not ready to be a part of that. I expect in the next few years that there'll be a lot more of them. I have 8 nieces and nephews, and 5 of them are married, and the 6th one's getting married this summer. So there's 3 already. I'm sure there'll be a lot more along the way. And you know, it, it, I know my reaction. So right after my first miscarriage, when I was still married, right after the first one, my husband's brother had a newborn, and they put the baby in my arms, without asking. They're just like, here, I'm sure you want to hold the baby. And it was right after that first one. And I had a terrible physical reaction of wanting to throw the baby. It was very scary. I'm not a violent person. I can't do kickboxing because I can't throw a punch. Like,
Right.
I'm not a violent person. And I had this horrible feeling. And I sat down on the couch so that I would not drop the baby. So I don't think anybody wants to be near me with an infant. I just think that's a bad idea.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know what'll happen as their kids get older. I assume that I'll, like, it's the trigger is really infants. Um, it'll
I was just going to ask you that, whether you've recognized in yourself that maybe, does a 5-year-old bother you in the same way as a newborn?
It makes me sad, but not the violent, not the, it makes me sad.
Right. Right. Look, I know, and I'm digging around in a space that is emotionally fraught, and I apologize.
I
I,
mean,
I
it's just, I mean, people need to know they're not alone. And I think it's really important that people know that you're not alone. That, I mean, people said to me, "Oh, well, you're so strong." And well, no, I just do this stuff. I'm not any stronger than you. That doesn't, I just do it. But it doesn't mean that I don't hurt. And now I'm, getting a little older. It's been a long time already. And there are people in my orbit who are, I mean, my brother, who's younger than I am, is a grandparent. Um, people are starting to become grandparents. So it's a whole new set of, life experience that I don't get to have.
yes, and I'll let me, and I think that that piece is something that people don't understand about this, about infertility and loss. They don't, they think it's a finite period of time where it's your fertility years, and either it's going to happen or it's not going to happen, or you're going to have the number of kids that you want or not. But what they don't realize, and I hear this over and over again from so many people, is that as life goes on, there are other triggers. It's exactly what you just said. It's the, now I'm also not going to be a grandparent. Now I'm watching my nieces and nephews have kids. Like it's not personal for you anymore, and you and your body, but it's still watching your life proceed in a way that you didn't expect.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's one thing that I want to, remind your audience. Um, when I went through infertility treatments, I signed the consent that was put in front of me by the clinic. When we got divorced, I had 4 frozen embryos. My ex-husband did not let me keep those embryos. Um, and so the law, the legal justification for that was that New York State has a public policy against forcing somebody to become a parent if they don't want to be, and he would have been exposed to child support because you can't waive child support. It's the child's right. So if I had used those embryos and gotten pregnant and had a child, that child could have sued for child support at some point in time. So
Wow.
I didn't have a. So 2 points I want to make. One, the law is now different. We successfully changed the law so that the non-consenting parent will be deemed a donor for that purpose and will not be liable for child support if the election is made prior to a pregnancy. So he
Wow.
couldn't have used, a man would not be, a person, a party would not be able to use that excuse any longer. And the second thing is I want to encourage everybody, regardless of the law, look at those consents. Don't just sign the boilerplate that the clinic throws in front of you. They're hard questions, they're hard issues, they're probably questions you don't want to have, but you sign the get thing before you get married. So look at the consent. Bad things happen in life. Just make sure you know what's going to happen to your embryos if you get divorced, if one of the parties dies, if if there's all kinds of eventual. Think about that. Think about what you want to do. um if one of you is sick, if think about it. You don't just have to sign the consent that they throw in front of you. I can't stress that enough.
Incredible. Thank you. I was going to ask you what happened, and what happened to those embryos, and I assumed that it was some legal piece, and it exactly was that you were not allowed to access those because of what the mandate was at that time. And I'm glad that that got changed. You're 1,000% right. Like this, I think people go into these treatments and they think like, okay, we have this problem. Let's go to the doctor. Let's try to get it figured out. And like, I'll just sign it away because I just want the treatments to start. And people don't really pay attention and don't really think about the what ifs. And it's a really great reminder for everyone to think about the what ifs before you sign those papers. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, Risa, last question. Give me one or two things, fun things, things that brought you joy, things that still continue to bring you joy in the midst of all of the pain and the different pieces that you went through. What were the things besides, knowing that you were working for something that was going to change laws and that was going to change people's lives? What personally were the things and are the things that make you happy throughout all of this?
So, I'm a beach person. I love beaches. And when I went through fertility, like I'm sure all of you have done a million different things. And one of them was I went through a bunch of guided meditations. And during that time, I actually learned how to go to the beach, in your own head. And that was, like you have to learn how to focus really hard to be able to do that. I am not a great meditator, but I can now go to the beach in my own head. Like I can picture my favorite beach. I can picture the walk up to the beach. I can feel the sand. I can feel the sand, hear the waves, picture, smell the flowers. I can actually do that. I'm so proud of that skill that I can go there in my head. So I'm standing in a really annoying line somewhere and I just go to the beach.
Amazing. Oh, I need to learn that skill. You and I are going to have to talk about this later. Okay, that's one. Give me one more. Something, yeah, give me one more, because I always like to try, it doesn't work all of the time, but I like to try to end and give people something tangible that they can do for themselves in their own lives when things are just absolutely going haywire. And I always like to really give people, sometimes like what one person does really hits you. You're like, I could do that. And so give us one more thing.
So this is a really silly one. I don't know why I even thought of it because I never told anybody this, but ever since I was a kid, when I had to clean my room, I always started with my underwear drawer. And when I read Marie Kondo's book, she has a different way of folding. I now fold my underwear in a different way and I make them stand up and I color code them. And when I'm really depressed, I clean out my underwear drawer and they're colored. And the color, like they go, dark to light, so you don't need to know the colors of my underwear. But
I mean, maybe people want to know. So
it's a way to impose order when you're feeling like out of control and everything feels crappy. But my underwear drawer is really organized. My like I definitely like candles, really well scented candles. I spend too much money at Sephora. It's the weekend when they have that promotion, so this
yes.
weekend to buy Sephora 20% off on Friday.
Ching ching. Okay, filing that away. Okay.
So little things like that, retail therapy. Oh, you're correct. It only goes so far, and especially when you're spending money on other things, you don't want to overdo it. Then it has other consequences that aren't good. But I think that it's the control factor. Like, what can you control in your life? And so picking the things that you can do, have a little bit, because we have so little control over anything. I wonder what the person I was when I was, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 would think if they knew that at my age, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. I don't know what that person would think. So you know that you don't have a lot of control. Find the ways you have a little bit,
Thank you. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And you're 1,000% right. So many people talk about this loss of control and feeling like, you're as you call the cycle of cycles, the waiting and the waiting and the waiting and not knowing, and someone else dictating when you're cycling and how you're cycling. And it's up to the person up there or whoever you believe in terms of whether you actually get pregnant, whether the pregnancy holds, and all of these other things. Yeah, but it's the little things that you can tangibly open a drawer and say, yes, today is pink. Like, I mean, not that you told us there is pink, I'm just presuming.
There's pink.
but you're 1,000% right. There is something about that control, about, you know, little pieces in our lives that enable each of us to be able to get through another day of uncertainty or another day of disappointment. So thank you. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your work and your life for the rest of us to benefit from. We are so grateful. We are really so grateful.
Creating this very safe space for people to talk about these issues. It's so important. And again, you're not alone. None of us are alone. We have each other. And that support is everything. So what you're doing is truly such a gift to this community. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. Risa, can people reach out to you via your Instagram?
Of course. I assume it's on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It'll be here, and I will make sure to link it afterwards. Anyone, if you're interested in talking to Risa more about her story or more about advocacy, getting involved, she can point you in the right direction also. And I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for this.
When it's open for Resolve's Advocacy Day, it's virtual this year in DC, so there's no reason that everybody can't, join. So go to resolve.org and sign up to
Amazing.
pay.
Amazing. We will link that too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Good night, everybody. Good night.